This podcast is for general information only. It is not intended as a substitute for general healthcare services. If you have medical conditions, you need to see your doctor. Use of this information is at the user's own risk. Welcome to FitRx with Dr. Greg Dennis. Join me as we challenge the standard sick model of healthcare. This is your source for everything health, wellness, prevention, fitness, biohacking, and more. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of FitRx. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Dennis, and as I promised in the last podcast, I am back. Took a pretty long break there, but I'm excited to be back and just sharing information with you. Although you will be hearing my voice more, good or bad. Figured I have a lot to share, so I'm going to be talking more. However, I will still have some guests on here periodically. So I thought the best place to restart is something that has really become a foundation of how I think about health. I started thinking about this because there's so many people looking for a quick fix. And of course, things like peptides are really popular and supplements and all these things, but I feel like that so many people are missing the foundational things. And so I started thinking about what my foundational, what I'm calling the pillars of health are. So I came up with my 7 pillars of optimal health. Now, there are different variations of this. I certainly didn't make up this concept, but I kind of customized it for me. So these are the ones I feel that are most important. And I have began using this in my clinic. And so I've been asking people to score themselves on these different pillars so that we can focus in on some of the weaker points in order to hopefully get all of these strong, which in my mind makes up the foundation for optimal health. So the 7 pillars that I came up with are sleep, nutrition, movement and strength, hormonal health, emotional health, relational health, and spiritual health. Optimal health isn't created by fixing just one of these. These pillars interact with each other. So, for instance, poor sleep makes nutrition harder because you're tired, hungry, and more likely to make poor food choices. Poor sleep interferes with exercise, performance, and recovery. Hormonal problem can interfere with sleep. Emotional stress could do the same thing. Relationship problems can interfere with sleep. Spiritual health and not having a sense of peace, meaning, and purpose can affect emotional health, which affects everything else. And so these all kind of tie together. And so over the course of the next several months, I'm going to be kind of doing a deep dive into each one of these. But today, I'm going to start with sleep. I feel like sleep is kind of the foundation because if you're not sleeping well, you can be doing all of these other things correctly, and you are still not going to obtain optimal health. So what I've found since I have began doing this questionnaire in my office is that this is the weakest link for the vast majority of people. So I feel like as a culture, we're not sleeping well. And I will also say, I feel like my patients are healthier than most. I mean, they're healthier than the average population out there, at least I hope so. But they're still not sleeping great, the majority of them. And so this is a really, really big issue in our society that I feel like we just need to talk about and definitely prioritize. The reason it's so important, I mean, sleep is not simply just, quote, downtime. It's an active period of physical recovery, brain restoration, memory consolidation, hormonal regulation, metabolic regulation, immune function, muscle recovery. I'm seeing that a lot of people are only getting maybe like 5 hours of sleep, and they're wanting more hormones, or they're trying peptides, but they're just not getting adequate sleep. So you can really optimize everything else. But if you're chronically sleeping 5 hours a night, again, you're not going to build optimal health. So how much sleep do we need? Really 7 to 9 hours is what's recommended. Obviously, we're all individuals, and that can vary, but most of what's been studied indicate for adults, we should shoot for 7 to 9 hours. Also, time in bed doesn't equal time asleep. So, somebody who goes to bed at 11 p.m., gets up at 6 a.m., isn't necessarily getting 7 hours of sleep. Things to ask yourself: do you wake up naturally, or do you need multiple alarms? Do you feel refreshed when you wake up and throughout the day? Are you sleepy during the afternoon? Do you depend heavily on caffeine or, God forbid, monster drinks, which I hope you're not consuming? Do you fall asleep unintentionally watching TV? Do you sleep significantly longer on weekends? If someone routinely needs to catch up on weekends, that may suggest insufficient sleep during the week. I want to briefly touch on wearables, things like Apple Watch, Fitbit, Oura Ring, Whoop Strap. I do think these can be beneficial, although not necessary, but can definitely give you some data. I will say I have 2 of them, although I'm kind of a nerd with this stuff. I have a Whoop Strap and an Oura Ring, and I use them both and kind of compare. What I like about these is they can give you an idea. They're certainly not perfect, but they can give you an idea on the amount of REM sleep, the amount of deep sleep that you're getting. What's been the most beneficial for me is knowing what changes that. In other words, eating late at night before I go to bed definitely changes those metrics. Alcohol certainly does. So just kind of having that information, I think, can be beneficial. Let's talk about step 1. Let's build the foundation. And so this is, what most people would call sleep hygiene. And this is just, doing the basic foundational things to give yourself the best opportunity to sleep. One of the biggest things, and I feel like probably one of the weaknesses that many people have, is just a good sleep schedule or a routine. Our body likes a routine, so we really need to go to bed at approximately the same time every day. We need to get up at this approximately the same time every morning, and try not to shift this dramatically on weekends. Our bodies do very well with a routine. Our bodies really like a good circadian rhythm. So with that in mind, one simple thing that can actually improve your sleep, and this has been studied, is morning sunlight. So 5 to 10 minutes is all it takes of early morning sunlight. So if you're going out and doing a walk outside, or there's times I simply just go outside and face the east while I'm drinking my cup of coffee, and you don't have to stare directly at the sun, but just kind of face that direction, or just be outside in the sun is really all you have to do. And by doing that in the morning, it's been shown to actually increase melatonin production later that evening. So again, go outside, drink a cup of coffee. If you have a dog, walk your dog, or just take a brief morning walk, especially during this time of year, the summertime. I'm in the Midwest, but obviously, everybody's climate is going to be different, and it is harder in the winter, but, just try to get sunlight when you can first thing in the morning. Very cheap and simple, but effective thing to do to help with that circadian rhythm. So next, you want a good pre-sleep routine. Give yourself 30 minutes to an hour to start winding down, and this may be things like read a book, do some stretching, pray, journal, talk quietly with your spouse or partner, and just relax. If you can, try to avoid doing work stuff and being on social media and watching, an action movie, especially in bed. I am really not a believer of a TV in the bedroom for that very reason. So if if you have a TV in the bedroom and you're watching TV at night and you're really wanting to prioritize sleep, I'd get it out. So we want to reduce nighttime light and stimulation. And so not only TV, but probably more people are on their phones, tablets, things like that. And they're getting mentally stimulated, as well as the addition to exposing us to the blue light, which is unfortunately decreasing melatonin production. So some things we can do: just dim the lights in the evening. You can put a lot of your devices in nighttime mode. I know the iPhone, you can do that. And I would just try and reduce unnecessary phone use altogether. You can also have some blue light glasses. So I have some blue light reading glasses that I use at nighttime, and I do think that makes a difference. So I'm less concerned about somebody having the perfect sleep technology than I am about them simply developing a routine that tells their brain the day is ending. And that's what all this stuff is doing. I mean, as you're turning the lights out, you're minimizing blue light, you're getting light, in the morning, you're working on that circadian rhythm, and you're telling your brain, hey, it's daytime, it's time to wake up. Now it's nighttime, time to relax and go to bed. So next, you want to stop eating close to bedtime. Especially avoid large meals, sugar, things like alcohol close to bedtime. So I tell people, try to get a 3-hour window from your last calories to the time you go to bed. So I try to have a pretty hard cutoff at 7 p.m. I'm usually going to bed around 10, and that works pretty well for me. I will say, when I was talking about my sleep metrics and these wearables that I use, that is one of the things that significantly affects my sleeping, the deep sleep and the REM sleep, is if I eat, later, closer to bedtime. And not only for sleep, that's just a healthier practice in general to reduce insulin levels and allow improved healing and autophagy and all that kind of stuff. But we're specifically talking about sleep, but that is a very easy thing you can do. Next, you want to optimize the bedroom. So just think you want cool, dark, quiet. So as black as you can get. If you have to use blackout curtains, do it. Again, turn devices off, try to turn night lights off. Just get it as black as you can. Ideal temperature is about 66 to 68 degrees is what they have found that people usually get the best quality sleep. If you're married, a lot of times this is, kind of a struggle between spouses. Some want it warmer, some want it cooler, but I'm just going to tell you what the data says, and that's the ideal sleep temperature is about 66 to 68 degrees. Also, if you need to turn a fan on, if you need a little white noise, that's all okay. Just make sure the bedroom, just becomes a haven for sleep. Those are kind of the foundational things. And I feel like if people would prioritize those things, then their sleep scores would significantly go up. And again, those are all just kind of simple things you can do, but it just requires good habits. So there are 3 things that can sabotage sleep that I want to talk about. First one, caffeine. Most people know that. Caffeine can keep you up at night. I would make a pretty hard cutoff. Hey, I'm a coffee lover. I love coffee. It's one of my favorite things in the world. But have a hard cutoff. I would probably say for most people, everybody metabolizes caffeine differently, but I would say for most people, about 2 p.m. would be a hard cutoff. Maybe earlier for people who are a little more sensitive. There are people who can still fall asleep after drinking caffeine later in the day. However, they are probably still going to have poor sleep quality. So I would just, again, make a hard cutoff. Next is alcohol. Alcohol, many people feels like it helps them relax, but that doesn't mean it improves quality of sleep. So even though they may feel a little, more sedated, they're going to get more fragmented sleep. They're going to have more awakenings. They're going to have poor restorative sleep, worsening snoring or sleep apnea, and more waking during the second half of the night. So I will say, again, back to my metrics and the things that I measure, this is probably the single thing that affects my sleep the most is alcohol. If on a rare occasion I'm, out drinking later with the guys and I have more than one, and especially if it's towards, later in the evening, I'm going to be in the red. And which means that's from the Whoop strap, and that's your recovery index that, looks at several different things. But basically that's going to mean I did not recover well because of poor sleep, a lower heart rate variability. And so if I'm going to drink, which, I try to keep minimal, but, I may have one drink very early in the evening. So alcohol is a big one. Third thing is stress. A racing mind is one of the most common sleep complaints. And this is honestly probably the hardest to treat. People are stressed. I mean, we live in a stressful world. Life is stressful. I get it. There's not a simple fix for this, but you just got to work towards de-stressing. Try to target that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relaxation. Things you can do: deep breathing, things like box breathing, which is, like inhale for 6 seconds, hold 6 seconds, exhale 6 seconds, hold 6 seconds. It's box breathing. You can do that during the day as well, but of an evening, you can prayer, meditation, journaling, brain dump, before bed. Don't take all that to bed with you. So some ideas to do that are just write down what you're worried about, maybe what you need to do tomorrow, or anything you're afraid you're going to forget. And then just give yourself permission to deal with it tomorrow. Kind of write it down. You got it. Turn your brain off. Okay, I want to talk about exercise as it pertains to sleep. So exercise can actually improve sleep. And this is another example of how all of these 7 pillars kind of interact with each other. So exercise increases sleep drive. It improves metabolic health. It reduces stress. It improves mood. However, there is a caveat. Intense exercise late in the day, especially immediately before bed, can be stimulating. So I would make it a rule to finish intense exercise approximately 2 to 3 hours before bed. Now, I think you can probably walk because that's part of relaxation, but any kind of intense exercise I would try to do earlier in the day. So let's talk about supplements. Everybody's wanting supplements to help, and they can. I would definitely put most of your priority on all the things above, but I do take some supplements, and I think that supplements can help. So I'm going to go through what I use. There's all kinds of supplements out there, and you'll hear all about supplements for sleep. These are the ones I feel can be most important and that I've tried personally and have helped. Number one, probably the biggest one, is magnesium glycinate. You've probably heard me talk about magnesium before. Most people are magnesium deficient, and this is magnesium is probably, it is one of the most recommended supplements, that and vitamin D, that I think almost everybody should be on. So magnesium glycinate is probably my favorite. It is very well absorbed, and it just helps you relax. I usually recommend probably 200 to 400 milligrams of an evening. Other options. Melatonin, melatonin helps some people. Others it does not. Times that I do think melatonin can be helpful are when you travel, especially if you're in a different time zone. Melatonin can help. I don't think this is really a good long-term option. I would also use the lowest but effective dose. So I would start anywhere from like a half a milligram, maybe, gradually go up to 3 milligrams. There are some people out there that feel like this really helps. Melatonin never really helped me. For the most part, I would say most people do not get a ton of benefit with melatonin. The studies on this, honestly, they're kind of all over the place. I wouldn't just bank everything on melatonin. Another supplement is L-theanine. This may help with mental relaxation without being too heavily sedating. I would go with 100 to 200 milligrams of this. Next is glycine. This is probably underutilized. Most people may not have even heard of glycine or use it. It's an amino acid, and it can help sleep quality. It can also help with nighttime thermoregulation, so it kind of helps lower your body temperature. I feel like it helps you get to sleep. This has actually been in my supplement stack for a pretty good while. I take it along with magnesium glycinate. So I usually take 3 grams at night. It's probably where I would start, 2 to 3 grams. There are some longevity people out there that take 5 grams at night, but I would certainly start with 2 to 3 grams of glycine. Next up is apigenin. So this is a naturally occurring flavonoid that's also found in chamomile. I'm sure you've heard of chamomile tea that can help you relax. And again, it just can help you relax. I have used this as well, and I think it might have helped a little. Those are probably about the only ones that I would recommend. There's a lot of supplements out there, but these are the ones that I feel like have a little data behind them and that I've used personally that, have noticed some improvement from. Don't feel like you need 6, 7, 8 supplements every night to fall asleep. I mean, don't turn sleep into a giant supplement stack. So let's talk about over-the-counter stuff. Over-the-counter antihistamine sleep aids such as doxalamine can sometimes help short-term. I feel like that's what they're for. I mean, if you need to use these short-term for whatever reason, that's okay. Downside to these is you can get tolerant to these. They can cause grogginess the next day. They can sometimes give you some anticholinergic effects, and you can just get dependent on taking these. There are some prescription medications out there. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Ambien, Lunesta. I mean, there's a lot of prescription medications. Trazodone is one that I prescribe a lot if I am using prescription medications, just a very low dose trazodone for sleep. I mean, there's others out there. So what I would say is this. I would certainly try all the things above that we've talked about first. And when I'm dealing with anything, whether it's sleep or, other things, I always try to do it naturally and, let the body heal itself. And however, I'm not anti-medication. I just believe it a lot of times doesn't fix the root cause. But what I will say about sleep is that sleep is so important. If you have to be on a prescription medication to sleep, then you're going to be, I would rather you do that and sleep than not be on anything and not sleep well. So try all the above things first. But if that's not working, talk to your provider, get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I mean, I've seen that where people, they're just so determined to do it on their own, whether through supplements or whatever, and they're going years without sleeping well. And they've tried everything, but they kind of refuse to take that step on prescription medications. Sometimes they're needed, even if it's a short time. And again, I would rather somebody be on a low-dose prescription medication and sleep than not, because I think you're going to be healthier for doing that. Now, we also don't want to just jump straight to that, which probably most, quote, conventional doctors do. And, they kind of skip all the important stuff. I'll also say, make sure you're not missing a root cause. Poor sleep is sometimes the problem, but sometimes poor sleep is a symptom of another problem. So, such as sleep apnea. If your spouse tells you that you're snoring loudly, or they've witnessed some apneic episodes, you're waking up gasping for air, you have morning headaches, excessive daytime sleepiness, high blood pressure, things like that, you need to get that looked at, as you may have sleep apnea. You probably need a sleep test. Some people who have sleep apnea, we get them treated with a CPAP machine, and I mean, they just have a whole new outlook on life because their quality of sleep goes way up, and then lo and behold, their hormones go up. Once again, everything is kind of intertwined. So, other things that can affect sleep are hormones. Perimenopause, menopausal women can have night sweats, hot flashes. Again, when you're talking to your provider, make sure you're kind of thinking about all the kind of the underlying causes that may be contributing. Other things might be metabolic factors, so blood sugar instability. We talked about alcohol use. certain medications. I mean, if you're on other prescription medications that aren't for sleep, those could be affecting your sleep. So you may be getting up at night to pee, and that's affecting your sleep. So those kind of things need to be addressed. And so I think the important thing here is to prioritize sleep. Like, get with a provider, find the root cause, do your part by doing all the foundational things we talked about earlier. But you've got to prioritize sleep, just like you're prioritizing hopefully other parts of your health by going to the gym, by eating good, by doing all these other things. You've got to put priority into sleep. So do whatever you have to do. Lower stress, get in a better circadian rhythm. And if you have to be on medication, you have to be on medication, but prioritize sleep. So here's my challenge to you. For the next 7 days, I want you to wake up at the same time every morning. I want you to get outside for morning light. We're in the summertime now. You should be able to do this, even if it's 5 minutes. Go for a walk, go have a cup of coffee outside. Just, again, do it for 7 days. No caffeine afternoon. Finish eating 3 hours before bed. Spend the last 30 minutes winding down before you go to bed. Again, brain dump, like we talked about. Keep the bedroom cool, dark, and quiet, and give yourself a chance. Give yourself enough time in bed to actually get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's my challenge. Do that the next 7 days. Then I want you to ask, how do you feel? You don't start with supplements. Just do all that. If you're doing better, but maybe you're not quite there, maybe you're waking up some during the night still, then add in those supplements that we talked about. And then maybe do, some of those other things. But I bet your sleep quality will be better just with that basic stuff. So, as we close, I talked about the 7 pillars, and sleep is only one of those. But you can already see that I don't think we can really separate all of these, that, they're all kind of intertwined. Your nutrition affects your sleep. Your exercise affects your sleep. Your hormones, stress, emotional health, all affects your sleep. So that's why optimal health isn't about finding one magic medication, supplement, diet, or exercise program. It's about building a strong foundation in all of these areas. We're going to talk next time about a little bit of nutrition. I've had a lot of episodes over the years of doing this podcast on different aspects of nutrition, but I'm going to kind of dive into that a little bit. Looking forward to, again, being back on with you. I appreciate everyone listening, and we will talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to FitRx. I invite you to share this with friends and family. If you would like to contact me, you can visit our website at fitrxwellnessok.com, or you can email me at drgreg@fitrxwellnessok.com.